So we've just heard about how far we've come since the Paris Agreement. So now let's turn ourselves to look forward. So 10 years post the agreement, the issue is not ambition. We've worked that out. The issue is who is challenging. The issue is a challenge of delivery. How are we actually driving this change forward? And so in this next conversation we're about to have, it's all about the voices that sit outside the system and how they connect or collide with institutions. I have two brilliant voices who are going to be joining me for this dialogue to explore how do we move faster. First, please welcome to the stage my two guests, Chief Creative Officer from the UNPD, Boaz Paladi, and a member of the UN Secretary General's Youth Advisory Group on Climate Change, Nesreen El-Siam. Hello, hello.
Hi.
Diana, are you rejoining us as well?
We like her, so we keep her.
Okie doke. So it's been 10 years since the Paris Agreement, and we're here looking at the legacy of the Paris Agreement. And looking back on that moment, what have we learned? Boaz, maybe you can start. What are the key things that you think we've learned post-Paris Agreement?
So to me, what we've learned is what's happening here. If you look behind us, that's where the transition is happening. That's where the hope is. That's where the opportunity is. That's what we've learned. We've learned, like Diana just said in her keynote, that there's a glass half full here. Although kind of like we're far behind, and although kind of like the reports are a bit scary, there's still an opportunity for us to really create the tomorrow that we want. And I think that's the lesson that the most important lesson that we've learned in the last 10 years.
The opportunity is absolutely still there. Nesreen, what do you think the biggest learning that we've had is?
I think Paris Agreement was, as I call it always, a mega social experiment, because it was more of a voluntary nature. It was more built on the goodwill of the countries. And as far as we are right now, we are not there. So I can't say that the experiment totally failed, but we learned very good lessons from it. One, I think that reducing emissions is a must, yet it's not happening enough. Two, removing emissions that we already have is also a must, and yet we are very far from having enough studies on the mechanisms of carbon removal. The scientific support for carbon is also way far behind, and I think now the world is going very much into experimenting and learning more and reading more, and it should be supported more research about carbon removals and different climate contingency processes. And I think the third one will be repair, because our system needs a repair, and now nature-based solutions is going quite well, but it's still not there also. And the last one is resilience, and I think that this is the biggest outcome from Paris, that we need the four together. The reduce, the remove, the repair, and the resilience. Otherwise, we cannot move forward. It's like a four pillars building for sustainability and for climate action.
I love those four really clear, distinct pillars. People know the climate story. I mean, we're here at Change now. The story around where we are with climate isn't something that's new to the people in the room. But what people are sometimes unsure of is, what should my role be within this climate story? So what turns people from understanding the urgency to being in a place of agency around climate, especially for a public who right now are feeling potentially quite overwhelmed by the amount of things that are flying at us? How do we turn that urgency into momentum and agency? Nesreen, do you mind starting?
I think this is a very funny question, because I always get in the middle of a fight. And it's a fight between consumers and producers. Consumers say, if the producers didn't make this thing, I will not use it. And the producer says, we don't make things out of the blue. We really depend on the demand. So if there's no demands from the users or consumers, then we will not produce, really. And I think it's definitely both. Consumers have to be the agents by stop consuming and using the things that we know that hurt the planet. But also, let's face it, it's not the consumers that make the most impact and the most emissions. It's actually the producers. And most of the time is not the final outcome and production that actually make the most emission. It's the process to make the final outcome that makes the most emissions. So yes, we all have to really have more sustainable living world and living systems, but also, let's face it, I mean, all of us in this room and maybe all of us in this continent are still less than how much US Army is producing out of carbon emissions. In fact, Africa as a continent, which one of the continents that have one of the biggest populations, have only 1% of the emissions. So even all of the African people went zero, like really minus, let's say minus carbon emissions, they will still have global warming, a very bad one also. So yeah, it's have to be both. Both have to be agents, both consumers and producers, and let's point more on the producers and say, hey, you're not doing enough. And even if we stop using your materials or your outcomes, it's the process to make it that produce more emissions.
We touched on consumerism and overconsumption in the panel before, so I love that you brought it up here as well. Boaz, from your perspective, what do you think is needed to transmute this urgency into actual agency? Because for some people, there's a sense of helplessness.
I think there is. I think the climate emergency is daunting. It's a big problem. One has difficulty in seeing oneself in it. How can I, as a small individual, have impact on a planet? So what we have to do is create. What we need to do is create agents of change, and we need as many agents of change as possible. We have about 8 billion of them. You know, let's get everyone on board. We need to convince everyone around the world that they are all agents of change, that we all can make a difference. And so, of course, kind of like, you know, everyone is right when they say that, you know, consumers themselves are not the biggest part of the problem and are not the solution. Energy use is probably the biggest part of it. But if we all take action, if we all are part of a global community that really kind of like looks at how we can make a difference, how each of us can make a difference, that will eventually make a difference. The other thing is that, you know, when people become agents of change and, you know, they're big CEOs of a company, they can take that agents of change into that big company. It's all kind of like a matter of people creating change. And I believe that to do that, we need to get everyone on board.
We've been talking a lot about getting everybody on board. We've been talking about implementation. We've been talking about collaboration. What do you think helps build collaboration between those inside these institutions that are needed to create the frameworks to support the collaboration, and those from the outside that are pushing this collaboration? Boaz, how do we really actually do collaboration?
I think, you know, the Paris Agreement is a perfect example of that. I mean, and what we see in the Paris Agreement and how it has moved forward in the last 10 years is significantly different. We see now when you go to COP, you know, when we get to COP Brazil, COP 30, we will see that civil society is a much larger force there, that youth are a much larger force, that business is a much larger force. And so essentially kind of like we've moved so far away from these powers that be deciding to a much more inclusive process that really kind of like has everyone in that picture. And I think that's an incredibly important part of it. It's really moving that process along, but in a way the process is moving itself. In a way the transition is happening, more and more actors are getting involved, more and more businesses are getting involved, and that's what's going to move the needle.
That collaboration. Nisreen, from your perspective?
Yeah, I think this question is quite timely, as all of us maybe are questioning whether we have global governance or not. and with everything happening in the world right now, I can very fairly say that the world global governance is being reshaped. The question is, how is this reshape is going to benefit us, and how can we take it back to our side? Well, first of all, I think we are all now questioning the existing institutions that is implementing everything, including UN, including different governments around the world, governments that we used to think they are leading the world, basically. And I think this reshape of the global governance can be back to our side by basically putting the power in the right hands. And by the right hands, I mean not a few hands, but many hands that can actually lead the things forward. Basically, as we all say, power to the people. But how can we literally give the power to the people? Well, one, I'm very disappointed that people voted again for Trump. But this is the past right now. How can we make the future more brighter? And I think having more young people in the global governance structures and having more climate believers and climate positive people is going to really reshape how we think on the general governance structures. The second thing is, how can we center science? I mean, we all heard Diana right now, and we've been hearing the IPCC for many years. But unfortunately, even for many decades, scientists were never really in the power. They always make reports that end up in the cabinets of whatever parliament or whatever government. But it is really high time to bring young people and women and scientists up to the hierarchy where they are the ones responsible for making the decisions, not people who take us backward, basically.
So we need a different distribution. Yeah, go on, give it a good round of applause. We need a different distribution of power and different voices that are actually around the table having those conversations. We spend a lot of time talking about the problems. We spend a lot of time talking about what's not working. But I'm really excited to hear maybe one or two examples of things where it has been working really effectively. Maybe Boaz, maybe perhaps you can start and give us some examples of right now where that you think more people should know about, where we are collaborating really effectively.
I think there's so many incredible stories around the green transition and where people are and what they're doing. I was just walking through the hall behind us as I was walking in, and it's so inspiring. It's so inspiring that so many people has taken this on as businessmen, as entrepreneurs, as solution providers. And I think those are the stories that need to be highlighted. It's important that we always kind of like try and see where the opportunity lies, where we can find the thing that will make it possible for us to create a better tomorrow. I'm an optimist. I still believe that we can create a better tomorrow. And I think the answer to it partly is what we're seeing here in Change Now, this incredible transition. Partly it's just incredible stories from all over the world that people are doing it. They're part of the transition.
People are part of the transition. Nizarine, do you have an example that you'd like to share with us?
I have many.
Okay, but we've only really got time for like one. So pick your juiciest one.
Okay, so one, I'm really proud of the youth climate movement around the world. They are really going very far in terms of not only the quantity of engagements, because we are far behind talking about youth engagement, but even the quality of it. So now we are talking about meaningful youth engagements. But the one example I want to talk about is basically the network that currently me and a team of people are co-founding, which is basically called Youth Alliance for Local Adaptation and Peace. And it's basically one of the networks that are covering over 27 countries that are very much in trouble in terms of governance, in terms of political situation, in terms of safety and security, but also very vulnerable to climate change. And it's shocking how some countries are doomed by being always less in terms of economy, in terms of climate adaptation, in terms of everything. And it's basically where countries where we really fail to look at very meaningfully. And the young people from this country are speaking out and saying, hey, we exist in this planet. We share the same atmosphere with you. We share the same Earth planet with you. It's high time to listen to us. It's time to bring us forward because we are suffering from both conflicts and wars and climate change.
Wonderful. I love those two examples. And I'm going to wrap on a single word from each of you. Fabius left us with the word implementation in the opening. If there was one word that you'd want everybody here to take away into the rest of Change Now, into the next decade, what would that be? Nazreen, I'll start with you. What would be your one word?
Truth. People should be true to themselves and to the work that they are doing.
Fantastic. And Boaz, what would be the
Opportunity.
Oh, I love that. Opportunity, because it keeps us open in a space of hope. Thank you both so much for your time. Please give them both a warm round of applause.
Can we take it?
Got another session immediately after, but I can take one with you afterwards.
Me too.
Sorry?
I'm also in the...
No, I've got another panel immediately now. I'll grab one with you in a bit.